Good evening, everyone. We'll get started with the meeting in just a few moments. We're working on resolving some technical issues. Thanks for your patience.
To continue your call in English, please press 1 now.
Para continuar,
Press 1 to continue.
Thanks for calling. To help us better serve your needs, please
Your call did not go through. Will you please try your call again?
All right, everyone. Thank you so much again for your patience. I'm hereby calling to order this meeting of the Lancaster City Council for September 27th, 2022. I just want to make some brief announcements and reminders for this evening's meeting. We are being live streamed, and you are being recorded when you're in this room. Take a moment, please, to silence your devices, or put them on vibrate. There will be several periods of public comment during this meeting on agenda items and designated periods for public comment. You want to make sure that you're making your comment for no longer than 3 minutes per speaker, and please begin all public comments with your name and block of residence for the public record. For all those who are willing and able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Harris, if you could please call the roll of members.
Yes, Madam Vice President. Mr. Arroyo. Ms. Baque.
Here.
Mr. Cleese.
Here.
Ms. Craig.
Here.
Ms. Diaz. Ms. Walsh.
Here.
And President Smith-Waddell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Our first item is the approval of the minutes for the meeting held on September 13th, 2022.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any council comments on the meeting minutes? Hearing none. Mr. Harris?
Ms. Baque.
Aye.
Mr. Cleese.
Aye.
Ms. Craig.
Aye.
Ms. Walsh.
Aye.
Thank you. Proclamations, honors, awards, and resolutions of recognition. Mr. Harris, do we have any of those this evening?
We do not.
Thank you. That will bring us to our first public comment period reserved for residents who have submitted in advance of the meeting. Do we have that public comment this evening, Mr. Harris?
We do, Madam Vice President. First, we have Ivan Acosta-Velez.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Acosta-Velez.
My name is Ivan Acosta-Velez. I live at 804 Highland Avenue. We hear a lot about the housing, and we still have problems. I'm going to ask you a question and think about it. If we get these people that are coming from Florida or Texas here, we can't even give homes to the homeless there. What are we going to do if they send us 1,000 people? Have you thought about that? Maybe not, but be ready, okay? Because that's what they're saying through the grapevine. All these little cities are going to start getting people, okay? And it might look cute, but when the press sees us that we can't even get homeless people housing, we need to look at it, okay? It's happening to other little cities around, and that's the problem with the housing. And the housing here. And you might think, oh, we'll handle it. No, the poor mayor's going to handle it, and it's going to be a mess just by herself. So we need to look at that if they send us buses of people here. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harris, is there more public comment?
Yes, next we have Kayla Webb.
Okay. Is Kayla here? I don't see her.
And next we have Eric Souza.
Is Eric here? No.
And last we have Sean Dominic.
Sean, good evening.
Hello, as before, I'm Sean Domensic, 400 block of Fremont, and with the Catholic Worker Movement here in the city. Madam Vice President, I'm wondering, I've been in touch, I know there's been some technical difficulties and everything. I've been in touch with the mayor's office and didn't get an answer. So I'm wondering if I could ask the mayor just a brief question on if there's been a follow-up to my request.
You're welcome to ask your question. I don't know if she'll be able to answer at this juncture, but
Sure.
that would be up to her.
Well, Mayor, I'm just wondering if there's been any follow-up, because my follow-up request hinges on whether or not there's been anything done so far on ceasing the enforcement of the no overnight policy in the parks.
The overnight policy related to the parks is not new, and we continue to enforce.
We also continue to work with our downtown outreach coordinator, our police social workers, the Homeless Coalition outreach folks. We do continue to make those connections as we also continue to work on affordable housing policy. And if you contacted my office after your last public comments, I am unaware, and I'd be happy to speak with you in greater depth than we have time for tonight.
Okay, and I'll certainly be doing so. I do want to just make a general update and reiterate my request. Water Street Mission, still full. I've touched base with them just recently. And as far as I can tell, this, regardless of any kind of, other efforts that are being done, which I appreciate and applaud, the grave injustice of persecuting homeless people for being homeless could happen tonight. And I don't think any of us should be able to rest easy while that is still a possibility. So I'd like to request specifically a 90-day moratorium on the policy of enforcing the no overnight law in the public parks for the homeless, while City Council could deliberate, and I've tried to be in conversation, I've spoken with a few of them about changes to that that could stop that cruel and unjust law.
I appreciate your advocacy, and I would also appreciate if you could advocate for more transitional housing units and affordable housing units so that folks actually do have a place to stay. It was a major hit to our system when the Motel 6 went out of commission because of the flooding issue that was there. And we are very aware of the issues. And I'll also just remind you and other members of the public that not every person that is sleeping in the park is homeless. And we are also working with Blueprints Addiction Recovery to make connections for addiction services as well. So there's a complicated, we're also working with the hospital in terms of the individuals who have extraordinary mental health needs that cannot be met by the city of Lancaster. I'm super clear that enforcement is not the solution. And we do not, with abandon, cite individuals who are sleeping in our public parks, and we also uphold the law.
I appreciate all of that advocacy, but I will continue. There's many people advocating for transitional housing. I'm glad for all of that, and I certainly appreciate their efforts, but no one is speaking up for a homeless person that can, again, be arrested for sleeping when they have nowhere else to go, and that's something I'm going to be continuing to advocate for until there's a change.
Just so you're clear, they're not arrested. I want to
Fine,
be very
cited,
specific.
yes. No, I'm aware, but frequent fines, citations, many other things that makes it harder for them to get out of the cycle of poverty that they're in, makes it them less likely to trust the sort of institutional resources that are provided when they're being cited, when they're being threatened by cops, woken up in the night, trying to have a night's sleep. So thank you for your time. And again, I'll be requesting you to consider that 90-day moratorium while we can begin discussing that among members of City Council, and I'll certainly be reaching out, so please take into your consideration. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Domencic. For the folks that, and I didn't see anybody come in, I will ask if they're here during our second public comment period, so they'd still have the opportunity to speak if they are here at that point in the meeting. Are there any other public comments, Mr. Harris?
There are not.
Thank you. That takes us to reports requested by council. We have an update this evening on the Lancaster City Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative, and I believe we have a presentation from our Human Resources staff on that. Absolutely. Yep, and it looks like you'll need to share the microphone, so you can either place it or slide it between the two of you there. Perfect.
Good evening, Vice President of the Council, Ms. Bakay, and to all councilors here, Mayor, and members of the public. My name is Sharon Allen Spann, and I'm the Leadership Development and Diversity Manager here for the City of Lancaster. With me tonight is also our Bureau Chief of Human Resources, Angie Papavasilian, and we'll be talking to you briefly about the work that we've been doing in human resources as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We can go to the next slide. So just,
Sorry.
that's okay. So just three things that we want to touch on tonight is, one, why the work we're doing is important. to the city of Lancaster, and also what the data shows. So we do want to share with you some data again during this period to talk about what we've learned so far. And then we will talk about how we're acting on the data that we've collected. So I want to start a little bit with just a short explanation of why the title says inclusive diversity. And often when we hear about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we say it in that way, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But in fact, diversity in and of itself is work to be done, but the diversity needs to be inclusive. And I'll give an example. So imagine if any of you have had a family member who has needed a transplant. When someone needs a transplant, when they need to receive an organ, they have a team. That team works to prepare the body for the transplant, right? So that that organ can be received and not rejected. When we think about diversity, think about it in that way, that this organization needs to be prepared to accept the diversity that we're hoping to bring. And so I think about it that way, like we are a team that is working to create an environment. So when we hire diverse people with diverse backgrounds, we're prepared to have them come and stay, right? We want them to stay in the organization and not just come because we can count the number, but if they leave immediately after we've hired them, then we haven't accomplished our goal. So when we talk about diversity, we're talking about inclusive diversity, the diversity that helps people stay in the organization. We can go to the next. So our work is really grounded by the strategic plan, right? The strategic plan really focuses on block by block. And I think about our neighborhoods and how the mayor has really worked to engage with our neighborhoods. So there is that sense of inclusion in the community. We're doing that same work internally. And so working on building an inclusive culture is one of the premises of the strategic plan. And so when you look at sound government, actually goal number one, and this I was very excited about when the strategic plan was updated, because goal number one under sound government is a culture of inclusion and public service, right? This work that we do is on behalf of the residents who work here. And so we want to focus on being more inclusive and also be focused on the services we provide. And so goal number one under sound government is what guides the work that we are doing now. And also the pictures that you see tonight on the screen are just some examples of the way we want to have our community. So the picture of the families really is from Celebrate Lancaster, and you can see how diverse our community is. And then you have two photos of employees who work here in the city. And so trying to show that the goal we're trying to achieve is to create a workforce that's more reflective of the community we serve.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm just going to take a few moments here to talk a little bit about some of the workforce data that we have collected. And if we think about the data collection, the way that we like to think about it is if you think about when we take a water sample, right? So if you're going to test some water, you take your sample, you've collected your sample, analyze it, you might ask questions, and from that you learn. You might learn something that needs to be corrected or something that needs to be changed. And from there, then, of course, you take action. So in this same way, what we are doing with our data is collecting, analyzing, learning, and taking action. And so when we take a look here at some of this data, the things that we're going to, the next slides I'm going to show you, are going to be our resident demographics and then some city workforce demographics. And so the slide that you see before you is a pretty simple slide in that it shows you what the demographics of our city residents are, as reported by the U.S. Census Bureau from, I believe it was 2021. And as you can see, roughly, we are about 57,000, a little under 60,000 folks that live in the city. More identify as non-white with about 61%. And then gender designation is around 52% female. So moving on, now that we've taken a look at what our resident demographics are, we take a look at some of our workforce or employee data. So we know that one of our goals is to have a workforce that reflects the diversity of the residents that we serve. From the data sample that you see on the slide, which does span over 3 years, so 2019, 2020, and 2021, you can see that we still have more work to do to move towards that goal. And currently, our workforce identifies as mostly white and mostly male. Next. So the last piece of data that we're going to look at is actually where we see a lot of our future work. We're going to, what you see on the screen is our new hire data, again, over the last 3 years, 2019, 2020, and 2021. And so we look at this and we say this is an opportunity for us. It's an opportunity for us as we bring new employees into the city workforce. And one of the ways that we're going to be moving forward is to make changes related to bringing in those new hires. We feel it's an area that can really help us move towards our goal. An example that we'll talk I'll just give you one example. So in 2020, we hired 42 employees, and of course that was the pandemic year. Out of those 42 employees, 18 were identified as white male. 11 of those 18 white males were public safety employees, so police and fire. And so that's just one small example. Obviously that doesn't represent our whole workforce or all of our new hires, but it gives you just a piece of the puzzle to show you that the work that we need to do really is well beyond public safety. It's across the workforce. But it's an area where we can examine our recruitment, selection, and retention practices so that we are going to be building, going forward, a more inclusive culture. And so I'll turn it back to Sharon.
Awesome, thank you. So another piece of data that we use when we think about inclusive diversity is our employee engagement survey, right? So yes, we attract employees to work here. One of the things that we really want to focus on is how we retain employees once they're here. And so over the last 2 years, we have implemented an engagement survey for all employees in the city of Lancaster. And when we talk about engagement, the goal around engagement is that an engaged employee is one who consistently exceeds expectations, they're energized, they're passionate about their work, and they give extra effort to drive our organizational improvement. Sorry, Siri is talking to me. And so when we look at measuring engagement, one of the first things we do is look at our response rate. So in 2021, 60% of the employees responded to the engagement survey. And surprisingly, when you look at that number, 45.7% of those employees who responded as engaged, which is our goal, right? Is to have employees who come to work, who want to be, who give the extra effort. And so that's a number that we will continue to work on, right, as we create an environment where employees feel welcome, they feel like they belong, they feel valued. When we talk about engagement, there are two statements that I thought were really important to share, is that 88% of the respondents also say that they regularly offer to help their colleagues. And also that 88% of the respondents are proud of the work they do. I hope that that's what you all see as city residents, as council members, the efforts that people put forth. And so our goal is to continue to support the efforts that help employees feel this way. Our areas of strength include coworker relationships. That showed up as a highlight in both our 2020 engagement survey and our 2021. So our coworker relationships are part of what helps people stay here, that sense of belonging. And also, our working environment is one that also ranks high for employees as they talk about their experience here in the city of Lancaster. Now, of course, with any survey, you have areas of strength, and then you also have areas where there are growth opportunities. And for us, our two areas are around our culture and also around diversity, equity, and inclusion, which of course is one of the reasons why we're here tonight, to show the efforts that we continue to make. So having said that, just a little bit of research around organizations who are leaders in diversity. According to the McKinsey study from 2020, there are 4 categories that diversity leaders exhibit: strong leadership commitment, having a strong culture of accountability, deploying innovative and ambitious interventions, and taking an intentional and organizational-led approach to DEI. I feel like the city of Lancaster has been working very hard at each of these 4 core areas. We have a commitment to strong leadership that I'll talk a little bit about when we talk about the actions that we've taken. We also have been very intentional about our approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we'll talk more about that as well. So, our points of pride. I'd like to take you a little bit back in time in history. Back to 2018, when Mayor Sirachi was first started as the mayor of the city of Lancaster. And one of the first actions that the mayor took with us was to identify diversity, equity, and inclusion as key bodies of work that she felt was important for the organization. One of the ways that an action that we took was to become a member of the Government Alliance on Racial Equity, GARE for short. That work helped catapult us into the conversations around what does it mean to be a government institution and be focused on equity and inclusion. That work then led to a small group of us coming together, myself, Angie, and Stephen Campbell, the Director of Public Works, who we worked as just a small group, and we decided, this is really important. We should really try to figure out how do we communicate about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the city of Lancaster. Unfortunately, we had the murder of George Floyd happen in that same year. We had already started our journey, and I want to be clear that the journey that we started happened before that moment, but after that moment, we actually codified the work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Council and the mayor approved the appointment of the position that I have now as the Leadership Development and Diversity Manager. So again, when we talk about being intentional and having an organizational-led DEI approach, it's the actions we've been taking since 2018. In 2020, then, we had a DEI strategy committee that focused very intentionally on creating the structures we needed to implement our employee engagement survey. It's the first time that we had a formal survey that was provided to all employees in the city of Lancaster, asking the question about their experiences in the city, right? One way that we can start to understand the employee experiences through an engagement survey. In 2021, then, we spent the year really focused on developing a plan. So we had engagement survey data. We heard what employees were saying about their experiences here in the city. And so we created a culture of learning and inclusion plan. That plan was focused on 3 key areas. One being culture shaping, the next on management training, and then also on structure and hiring. And it's those key bodies of work that we spent the year developing. Under culture shaping, we started to focus on learning and development. One of the areas that was very prominent in our engagement survey was employees talking about being able to learn and grow in the organization, to have career paths, to have professional growth. That's a way to retain. That's a way to help people stay engaged. And so our learning and development has grown with this plan. Also, one of the things that was a surprise to us in the engagement survey was the whole notion of rewards and recognition. People being acknowledged for the work they do. And interestingly enough, we have some great large events, but what we learned from the data is that it's also the small personal touches that help people feel connected to the organization. And so rewards and recognition is another part of culture shaping we're working on. The second pillar of our culture and inclusion, learning and inclusion plan is management training, because we do know that with a strong leadership team, we can build and maintain a strong employee base. And so our management training has been focused on supporting leaders. What is it like to support employees in an environment where diversity, equity, and inclusion are now a focus? Our leaders are all subject matter experts, very talented, very strong in their content areas. What we recognized as an organization is that we also have to make certain that our leaders are also strong in people leadership and how to create an inclusive environment. And so the management training is the second pillar that is part of our learning and inclusion plan. And thirdly, which most people would probably think this is the first pillar, but the structure and hiring is actually our third pillar. Yes, it is work that we need to do around how do we create a workforce that is equitable for all employees. And so under our structure and hiring, we looked at things like compensation and also about continuing to collect information like from our new hire and exit surveys. So those are new tools that we are using as well that give voice to individuals who are coming in to the organization, but also acknowledging when people leave the organization, whether they retire because they've been here 45 or 50 years, or whether they are leaving for another opportunity, their voices are also important in helping us understand the environment in which people work. And so some points of pride that I'd like to talk a little bit about tonight. So out of that culture of learning and inclusion plan came a few of these opportunities, again, based on feedback from our engagement survey. And so one of the programs we have is called Trauma Informed Lancaster City. And that's a project that we are working on with Penn Medicine, LG Health, to help improve our understanding as employees of what it means to serve the public. Again, right, the goal number one is a focus on inclusion and public service. The trauma-informed work helps us have a better understanding of what people carry when they come to our doors, right? What they are facing when we address them on the streets. And so the Trauma-Informed Lancaster City grant has given us the opportunity to train individuals on trauma-informed practices. We have 5 departments that have been trained fully that have also then taken an assessment that helped us think about what are the policies and procedures that we can update that will help us provide better service for our community. The other opportunity that we've had, and one, again, I will say that the mayor asked about when she started in 2018. It did take us a little while to get off the ground, Mayor, but I think we have it under control now, is our Red Rose Academy. And that's our onboard program for not just new hires. We have the Red Rose Academy for new hires, for individuals who transfer, and for individuals who are promoted. Because what we know is we started our Red Rose Academy on Valentine's Day 2022, but anyone who was hired prior to that moment would not have had that experience. And so we invite transfers and promotions to the Red Rose Academy so both our new hires and those who have been here get the same experience. In the Red Rose Academy, we have training on City Government 101. Patrick Hopkins happens to be our professor for that topic. And Barry Handwerger also spends some really serious time talking with employees about what it means to be a public service employee. It's very different than working in the private sector. And so the picture that you see up there, the people holding the red heart balloons are the first employees who participated in our Red Rose Academy. And so it is an ongoing program that we have, and we've gotten great feedback about the experiences that people have in the Red Rose Academy. Also, one of the things that we've started recently, thinking about women in leadership, because what we often see is women tend to be in roles that are more clerical based and not always in the supervisory or leadership roles. And so we have a group that's called the Ladies Who Lead and Their Allies, because we don't want to exclude anyone, but we want to have that focus on women in leadership. And so you see a picture there of a group of the women in the book club called Dare to Lead. We're reading the book Dare to Lead. And so again, trying to create spaces for people to feel like they belong here in the organization. And the last topic I'll talk about is our online learning that we have through Udemy Business. And Udemy Business is an online learning tool that allows people to both take courses that are assigned by their supervisors, but also provides our employees with self-directed learning. So again, we talked about how employees talked about we want to be able to learn and grow in this organization. Udemy Business allows us to do both. The lessons that come from the leadership, but also the learning that individuals want to take on for themselves. And I'll just highlight very quickly some popular courses that we had on Udemy Business in July and August were Understanding and Complying with HIPAA, 12 Strategies for Dealing with Difficult People, and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, a Beginner's Guide. So those are top courses that were taken in July and August, some self-directed and some that were assigned by supervisors. So, having said all that, as you all know, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a journey, right? We started 2018 and we continue this work. And so our journey continues again with the three core areas that we talked about before. Under culture shaping, we will continue to improve our learning and development opportunities. One of the things that we know about the Great Resignation is that individuals need to feel like they have a future in an organization. So we want to make certain that we start to create career paths so people see a path to the next opportunity in the organization. We will continue to work on our employee engagement using our employee engagement survey and other tools. Under our management training, one of our goals for next year is to have a Red Rose Academy specifically for leaders, right? Because we know that leaders, while yes, they join our Red Rose Academy, they also have specific needs around supporting the people who do the work in the organization. We also have a goal to implement what are called stay interviews. So yes, we can do exit interviews. That's also too late. A stay interview is about having conversations with individuals while they are fully engaged in work to find out what's working for them, what's not working for them, how can we help your experience be better. And so the stay interviews are another way to create that retention, which is what we're going after. And then in the last bucket under structure and hiring, we will be looking at revising our talent acquisition strategy, a major project for us. Because we do know that when we can have a more strategic approach to talent acquisition, we should see the numbers change in terms of how we create a more diverse workforce. And ultimately, we will be looking at focusing on hiring using an equity lens, because it is very important that we acknowledge that not everyone has the same experience, but it is important for us to figure out how to make that better. And so those are just some highlights around what happens next. We also are expanding this work beyond the four walls of human resources and beginning to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion across this organization. One of those projects is the PFM project that is going on now around equity. And so again, as we come back, while we're talking about the HR function now, we will continue to expand. So we start to look at policies and procedures in the organization as well. And so we thank you for this time tonight and appreciate your kindness.
Thank you very much. I do have one quick question, and I'll open up if there's any other from council. I'm just curious if the trauma-informed training, you mentioned 5 departments have completed it. There was a grant that allowed that to happen.
Yes.
Will that continue into 2022 and beyond?
It will continue into 2022. We were able to record one of the sessions, and so one of the ways that the content will continue to be available is through Udemy Business, because we can build a course. It will include also the assessment that went along with it, so people will have not just to listen to the presentation, but also to answer questions, like to test their knowledge.
Great.
So yes, that will be available ongoing.
Thank you. Any other questions from council?
Thank you very much for that. I just have a few questions. This work is very, very important, but I think oftentimes it's difficult to define success. So I was just wondering, how are you measuring growth and progress and development through all of this work? I know that you said you had surveys going out and exit and entrance interviews. Are you benchmarking all of this, and how do you know you're doing well?
And so because this is the start of our journey, the engagement survey started in 2020. Our new hire and exit survey started in 2021. So we're just now starting to have enough data to be able to say, where did we start and how are we progressing? And that is one of the bigger goals for us, is to be able to come back to you with a strategy that says, here's our strategy, here's what we hope to accomplish, and here's how we'll measure it. So that is one of the pieces that I continue to work on with Jess King around how do we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion in ways that are actionable.
Thank you.
Mayor, you had something?
If I may, I just, there are not that many times, I think once a year, that we have the Bureau of Human Resources before us tonight. And I just want to recognize Angie and Sharon, and also Patrona and Cameron and Ray for their work. I told Angie that I walked into Angie's office one day recently and said, this is probably the worst time to be an HR professional. We have just so much change that's happening in our organization. It is a super competitive very tight labor force right now. We've hired over 70 people this year to date, and if you remember the previous statistics, that exceeds a whole year's total. We have over 100 employees with 20 years or more of service. And so meeting the needs of our new employees and the employees that have been here and continue to work here every day for the last 20 years presents very different and unique challenges, both from leadership and development, as well as training and so on. So I just, again, because we don't have them here very often, I want to thank them for their service to the city, the hard work that they're putting in, and if you wouldn't mind joining me in a round of applause.
Thank you very much. And thank you for centering the residents who are public servants. Councilor Calixte, we have one more question, sorry. Don't go too far. I have to look.
So, yeah, you mentioned in your presentation that 14 people were hired in terms of public safety, and 11 of them were white males, right?
Yes, let me grab it. Yes, I believe it was 8. I'm not putting my hands in here. I believe they're out of order. Oh, Sharon has the report. Right, so in 2020,
Yes.
we hired 42.
I'm sorry, can you use the microphone?
Yeah, so sorry. Sorry about that. So in 2020, we hired 42 new employees.
Thank you.
Of the 42, there were 18 that self-identified as white male. Out of the 18, 11 were hired into public safety, police or fire positions. And so that's just one small snippet. It gives you just an example of some of the data, and it gives us just kind of a representative area where we can do more work and further the work that we're trying to move towards our goal.
Yeah, and in terms of public safety, it's a fact that most of our police officers in this city are white males and are white, while most of the people who live in this city are not white. So what do you think that should be done in order to create a better culture of inclusion and diversity in order to make the police force, our police force, more representative of the city.
If I could weigh in on that, Councilor Calix, it's such an important question. And one of the dynamics that we should spend more time talking about is the role of civil service requirements as it relates to the testing and point allocation, although we have tried to adjust for, if you will, the way in which the civil service process works by giving points for individuals who are city residents and/or who speak another language in addition to English. But this is a much longer, more in-depth conversation, and the majority of the folks that Angie is highlighting in her report joined the Fire Bureau because we had the largest new class of firefighters that joined. And so our efforts around recruitment and hiring as well there's an intersection between our recruitment and hiring efforts and the civil service processes that we are required to follow by law that somewhat challenge our efforts around diversity of our teams, somewhat. So we should talk more about that in greater detail. And there are advocacy efforts to adjust the civil service regulations across the Commonwealth that cities like Lancaster have to follow. So that's for another longer conversation.
All right, thank you.
That is the $50,000 question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. That takes us to, on our agenda, interim reports. Not on presentations, no. That takes us to interim reports on committees of council. Do we have any of those this evening, Mr. Harris?
We do not, Madam Vice President.
Thank you very much. Then that brings us to our legislative agenda for this evening. If you're following along on your agendas, we begin with the Heritage Conservation District. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Madam Vice President. First, we considering the following applications and recommendations from the Historical Commission for improvements to properties in the Heritage Conservation District. First is Washington Place Equities, owner of 250 College Avenue, proposes demolition of former hospital structures to allow new construction on the site. Second is Washington Place Equities, owner of 250 College Avenue, proposes modifications of a former hospital building as part of an adaptive reuse project. Third is Washington Place Equities, owner of 250 College Avenue, proposes construction of 53 new townhouses on the western half of the parcel facing Marriott Avenue, Northwest End Avenue, and West Walnut Street. And last, we have Eugenio Jimenez, owner of 523 Woodward Street, proposes construction of a two-story rear frame addition to a brick row house. And all those applications are recommended for approval by the Historical Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. I'm going to ask Councilor Craig how she wishes to take these items this evening, if she'd wish to take any of them together.
Yes, I do want to take A, B, and C, Washington Place Equities together. But can we do 523 Woodward Street first?
Yes, if you'd like to make a motion to that effect.
Yes, motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, this is a motion to approve item D on this agenda. Do we have any of the applicants for that particular property here this evening? Don't believe so. This was recommended for approval.
No.
Are there any council comments on that particular item, item D? Or from the public? Hearing none. Mr. Harris?
Excuse me. Ms. Baker,
Aye.
Mr. Cleese,
Aye.
Ms. Craig,
Aye.
Ms. Diaz,
Aye.
Ms. Walsh.
Aye.
Thank you. And then I'll hear a motion on your remaining items, if you're taking them together.
Yes, we are going to take those together and motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Councilor Craig?
Thank you. And at this time, I would like to bring Director Delphs forward so that he can give us a summary on these three properties and some insight to questions that we had just prior to the meeting.
Thank you, Councilor Craig, and nice to see members of council, Mayor Sarachi, members of the public. I just want to start out by giving a little bit of background. We spoke about this item 2 weeks ago, and revisiting that request to table from that last council meeting. Just to give a little history on 250 College Avenue, as you're aware, this project has been through a number of the land development processes, and today we've been focused on the Historical Commission action. It first went before Historical Commission at a conceptual level on March 21st, 2022, and at that time the Historical Commission provided feedback to the developer and to the architect of the project. There were some requested revisions to the project at that time, including removing terraces and adding dormers to the townhouse roofs for better compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. So that was the first time that it went before Historical Commission. It went back to the Historical Commission on August 15th, 2022, and that was for formal review at that time. The Commission recommended conditional approval of a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed construction of the 53 new townhouses, which is one component of the action before you tonight. Those 53 new townhouses are on the western half of the block, if you can picture that, primarily along West End Avenue. And then, as I mentioned 2 weeks ago on September 19th, our department asked whether we could table the action just temporarily for a couple of weeks. I wanted to do some additional due diligence to make sure that the recommendation from the Historical Commission aligned with our technical staff recommendations, particularly with respect to the design details for the townhome component of the project. We did conduct that additional analysis, and based on that further review, the department staff does support the Historical Commission's recommendation for approval, and we do offer a revised set of conditions, really targeted conditions to enhance the intent of the Commission's findings. We took a close look at the Historical Commission minutes and the dialogue that happened during that last meeting, and we would like to offer an additional set of conditions to Council. So if you'll bear with me, I'll read through those set of conditions. The first condition, condition number 1, masonry material used on the townhouse facades will wrap around the gable end walls of the townhouse units on the north and south ends of Northwest End Avenue, facing West Walnut Street and Marietta Avenue. This was labeled in the application that went to the Historical Commission as units 11 and 25. For the record, that condition was actually proposed by the Historical Commission, that first condition. The additional conditions that are forthcoming are additional enhancements. Condition number 2, masonry material used on the townhouse facades will wrap around all gable end walls visible from the right-of-way, including units 1, 6, 7, 12, 21, 22, 24, 30, 31, and 33, in addition to units 11 and 25. So essentially what that means is that the brick or masonry material that would be wrapping around those 2 units identified by the Historical Commission, that same treatment would be recommended for those additional 10 units, townhome units that I just read off. Condition number 3, there's something called EIFS, E-I-F-S. It stands for Exterior Insulation and Finish Systems. These facade materials will vary in color, particularly in the longer rows of 10 homes, to provide variations in rhythms and patterns along the street frontage. Condition number 4, the sidewall materials and/or colors of the townhouse dormers will be used as another means of establishing the rhythm and patterns of the development. The dormers are those little structures that sit on top of the roof line. Condition number 5, windows will be added to the attic levels of gabled ends of townhouses as feasible, dependent on staircase placement and privacy issues. And finally, condition number 6, the concrete masonry unit, CMU color, used at the base of the townhouses will be limited to one light tone, such as the parchment color shown in the application materials submitted to the Historical Commission. That's the masonry that runs along the base or foundation of the townhomes. Thank you for your patience, additional 2 weeks. I think that these targeted conditions do help in terms, do enhance the overall design of the townhomes from a standpoint of design variation and interest. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. Sorry for so much language here at the podium, but we wanted to be as specific as possible with our review.
That's quite all right, Director Delph. Are there any questions from council?
I do have just one, and I want to also say that I appreciate these revisions. They seem to capture more of the conversation that was actually had at the Historical Commission meeting, and also that the feedback that we received. For number 2 recommendation, the masonry material used on the facades and the wraparounds. So the original proposal, or the original recommendations, I guess, were just 11 units 11 and 25, and this includes a list of several others. Were these chosen for any particular reason, or just where it was feasible on the designs?
I appreciate the question. We included that treatment for any units that were visible from the public sidewalk. So any place that there was vinyl siding that could be seen from the public sidewalk, we extended this masonry treatment along the gable end of the townhomes. So that added up to an additional 10 townhome units.
Great, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one question, because this one seems to have a lot of moving parts. Can you remind me where we are in the process? Like I guess my question is, where does the Historical Commission fall in the planning process for these developers? And what happens now in regards to these changes?
Depending on the particular development, the Historical Commission action may fall at a different time in the process. Speaking just to the Historical Commission for the moment, they've made a recommendation for a certificate of appropriateness, and that is up to council to uphold or overturn that particular recommendation. This is a little bit unusual that we did additional staff review, but as I said, I wanted to make sure that the conditions captured the dialogue of the Historical Commission. As far as additional steps for the redevelopment of the hospital site, the next expected step is that they would go before the Planning Commission. I have Douglas Smith here as well, who could speak to the Planning Commission process if you'd like to delve into that at all.
Not this evening. I don't think I'm ready to do that yet.
Okay.
But as it relates to the 6 conditions, assuming they are voted up this evening and approved, how is that conveyed to the developer, and then how do you trust them to follow these measures appropriately? Is there any sort of accountability or oversight that happens?
Yes. In fact, we did spend some time last week and as recently as yesterday, communicating these conditions to the developers. They are aware of these, that they may be voted on by council tonight. As far as enforcement of these particular conditions, that happens at the building permit stage. So when there's a building permit application, our planning team, including our historic preservation specialist, Suzanne, would review to make sure that these conditions are met.
Great. Thank you.
Are there any further questions from council? Comments? We will definitely entertain questions from the public. Go ahead.
Are these houses for sale, the 53, or are they going to be rentals?
At this time, the developer intends them to be for rent. but that is not a final decision yet because they're still working through the land development process.
My recommendation for council, if you do approve it and they're for sale, like your culture shaping, the body here, culture shaping to get some of the black folks and some of the Hispanics getting some of those homes, okay? And
Thank you.
talk can be cheap, but we can talk, it's pretty, but it's not pretty. There's a lot of places we're getting new homes and we lack the sunshine that we have in our skin, and we lack gente que habla español, people that speak Spanish. So please look at it, because a lot of them voted for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim Stuhldreher, One United Lancaster. So the Historical Commission, the residents, the developer, just curious what engagement your department has had with those folks. You mentioned the developer has been made aware. Is it your understanding they're, willing to go along with the additional conditions?
Yes, based upon our last conversation, the developer is amenable to these 6 conditions. They, in fact, did have some clarification questions around the original language that we proposed. We did have to adjust it a little bit, but the spirit of the 6 conditions remain the same, and they're relatively comfortable moving forward with these. Only by comments that we've heard at City Council and written comments that we've received. And otherwise, I wanted to make sure that we stayed within the confines of the process.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from the public?
Thank you very much. Oh, please.
Good evening.
Pamela Stoner, 900 block of Marietta Avenue. I just had one question about the process. I spent quite a lot of time looking at the plans and the design from the get-go, from the beginning of the discussion about the redevelopment of the West End, and I'm really excited about a lot of the things that are happening there. My greatest concern, though, however, is in the process. When the design for the townhouses was presented before the Historical Commission, I was curious to know where the notification that is required prior to that meeting, the 10-day prior notification, was posted.
That was in the paper.
I can ask Mr. Harris, I think. You are also in charge of advertising those meetings, is that correct? Sorry. I'm looking.
Madam Vice President, there is a kind of an omnibus ad that's run at the beginning of the year in which the city's boards, commissions, and authorities are advertised with meetings for the year.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
those, the agendas for those meetings, as well as are posted on the city's website, as well as showing up on the city's events calendar. So that information is readily available on the city's website.
Sure, and that's to the legal requirement. Is there anything else that you would add to that, Director Delfs? Okay, great.
My question, however, is about the requirement in the ordinance that states that anything that goes before the Historical Commission must be posted at the site of the construction 10 days prior to the meeting.
I can't address that one. That would be to
Yeah, I don't know.
Historical Commission, right?
Mhm.
Thank you. No?
Okay.
Are there any further questions or comments from the public? That's it.
Thank you very much. All right, hearing no further comments from the public, Mr. Harris.
Excuse me. Ms. Bakay.
Aye.
Mr. Calise.
Aye.
Ms. Craig.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
Ms. Welsh.
Aye.
So approve the conditions.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us to Administration Bill Number 18, 2022. No, I'm sorry. I got one ahead of me. Administration Bill number 17, 2022. Mr. Harris.
An ordinance of the City of Lancaster restating Chapter 260 of the Code of the City of Lancaster, Stormwater Management, and providing for the means and timing of its implementation, providing for the severability of the ordinance, and the repeal of inconsistent ordinances.
I'll hear a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
And I have a motion to amend the section 260, 801D to be read as follows. It's rather lengthy, so bear with me here. So the following discharges are authorized unless they are determined to be significant contributors to pollution to the waters of the Commonwealth. 1, discharges or flows from firefighting activities. 2, non-contaminated discharges from potable water sources, including hydrostatic test water, water line flushing, and fire hydrant flushing, if such discharges do not contain detectable concentrations of total residue chlorine, TRC. Number 3, non-contaminated irrigation drainage. Number 4, non-contaminated heating, ventilation and air conditioning, HVAC, condensate, and water from geothermal systems. Number 5, diverted stream flows and springs. Number 6, non-contaminated water from crawl space pumps. Number 7, pavement wash waters where spills or leaks of toxic or hazardous materials have not occurred unless all spilled materials has been removed and where detergents are not used. Number 8, non-contaminated flows from riparian habitats and wetlands. Number 9, non-contaminated water from foundations or from footing drains. Number 10, non-contaminated water from lawn maintenance and landscape drainage. Number 11, non-contaminated groundwater. Number 12, residential, i.e. not commercial, vehicle wash water where cleaning agents are not utilized. And lastly, 13, routine external building wash down which does not use detergents or other compounds.
Thank you, Councilor Walsh. We have a motion to amend. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, so we have a motion on the floor to amend, Bill 17. So we will open it up to any council comments on the amendments.
I'm happy to take that. So this amendment has been a long time coming. I believe the process started in August. And it was tabled from last meeting to incorporate some of the due diligence and feedback that Director Campbell and his team received. So what you'll see in this ordinance is essentially three proposed updates. One is to clarify and strengthen the language used within. Second, the reason why this is so important is it hasn't been updated in 7.5 years. And essentially the changes that you'll see within here are for ensuring that references and requirements are matching. I had mentioned clarifications and streamlining of some of the processes and procedures in here, and then climate change related updates. I am happy to pass the baton to Director Campbell to take any additional questions, but I know that there has been a lot of the process of finally getting here has been a long one, but certainly thorough.
Yes, thank you very much. There's not much more I'd like to say unless you'd like to hear it. I think over the course of these reviews, many in the audience are becoming first-year engineers as a result of the discussions so far. I just wanted to note that the amendment that was added this evening specifically relates to making sure that we align the specific wording with the 2022 DEP model ordinance at the state level. In our review over the last few days, trying to confirm that everything was correct, we saw that there were some wordings that were a little bit different, and since a huge part of this ordinance is to clarify and make it easier for people to conform, we didn't want that inadvertent miswording to persist. So I apologize for it having been introduced as late as it was, but that is the case. If you wish, I have the engineer from Jacobs, Andy Potts here, as well as our stormwater engineer who can speak to any questions you might have.
Mayor Sarachi.
I just want to commend the process that DPW has gone through to make these revisions to the stormwater ordinance, and to your team, and also to thank the Community Planning and Economic Development team, for whom the partnership in moving projects through land development is going to become further cemented by this ordinance and the changes to that process. And what this all just means is that as we are going through projects that are coming in that are proceeding through land development, we'll start earlier in the process looking at stormwater and stormwater management opportunities before the project is fully designed and needs to be retrofitted to meet stormwater requirements. And so working smarter and not harder, hopefully saving our developers that are working in the city some money along the way, and capturing more volume to achieve our stormwater metrics. And that all sounds really simple, and it's going to be much, much harder because each of the projects that come before the city are complex, and there's not a lot of room to move a lot of water. So.
Correct. And I do want to say, to add to the invitation with the engineering community, these are some of the most lively discussions I've ever experienced regarding policy and how to make the better things work in an affordable and in a straightforward manner. It allowed us to have processes that are streamlined, as well as to elevate the way and the clarity by which we meet the stormwater requirements.
Thank you very much, Director Campbell. Are there any other comments from members of council? From members of the public?
My name is Ivan Acosta, 800, 800 Highland Avenue. My question on this, you said something about no detergent. Does that include when I clean my beautiful car, that I use storm water that comes through my house? What do I do with it?
That's a great question.
Because there's a lot of people that do it in the city, so I'm not the only one. So I guess it has to be specific, you know.
Director Campbell looks like he might have an answer for you behind you.
Do you? No.
Or possibly want someone on his team.
So I have a partial answer for you, and unfortunately, I'm going to be punting over to our engineer.
That's okay.
It does relate to the fact that in order for it to conform with the state regulations in the ordinance, the waters that are not regulated are ones that do not have the detergents and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So either Andy or Angie, would either of you like to speak to the clarification that we made sure we had in this in the wording?
Angela Rackville, Water Resources Engineer at the City of Lancaster. Yeah. So this language that was included is required language for the DEP 2022 Model Ordinance Update. So to speak to that, technically, no cleaning detergents would not be permitted with wash water.
I just want to say it in Spanish because I don't want you picking up my family. No pueden lavar los carros porque no se le puede echar. So what do they do with the water? Can there be an exception? I mean, not exception to throw that because there's so many people that wash their cars in the city. What do we do? I don't want to kill my plants either, so. It's something important because I'm telling you, in my community, you go on a Saturday, my cousins are cleaning their car, it's happening, so can we look at something that it could be told so people don't get in trouble before the fact? I'm not saying change it. What I'm saying is get an alternative. What do they do?
As far as I understand, the language were relegated to the DEP, which is the Department of Environmental Protection. So
can we get an answer from them? Because they won't answer me because I've called them on something
if we're
else.
aligning with their policies, I would say it would be worthwhile to reach out to an agent at the DEP with the concerns.
But I'm saying I have asked, but you guys are more important. Can someone or the clerk find out really what is an alternative, I think it would help the situation.
Director Campbell is raising his hand behind you, so he may have an answer. Conferring from the bench.
Hi, Andrew Potts with Jacobs Engineering was helping the city with these improvements. It's just a thought, but I think it is a really good idea I think we can contact and will contact DEP, because I think there may be an exception, especially around this in the combined sewer system, because one advantage to that is, assuming you're not washing your car in a heavy rainstorm, that water would go to the treatment plant and get treated. So, and their model ordinance is a broader ordinance meant to kind of cover all systems. And so you have this kind of exception, not exception, but not the typical system in the state. So that could be a way to address that concern, at least in the combined. Outside of it, they're very intentional in that language. So we could ask, but I'm assuming they would say no outside of the combined system.
And I also always like to take these challenges as opportunities to educate. I think this is a trigger that allows us to do more public outreach and education about what are some cleaner and better ways to be able to maintain our equipment, our cars, et cetera. Because if we all remember, part of why we are trying to manage the quality of the water that goes to the streets is that we're trying to manage the quality of the water that goes into the river. We are subject to a consent decree, which will be very, very expensive for the city of Lancaster to administer unless we find ways to be able to manage and find better ways of cleaning the water that goes into it. I do think with some of the funding that we have available in other arenas, we can create some of the education that may be useful and support not only the youth and kids and the people in the different grades of school, but also the various communities on alternate and better ways to do what is necessary to keep the water cleaner. I hear you very strongly, and it is, as we deal with cultural changes and cultural practices, we need to be aware of what resonates with the culture, but also what is going to create a better improved environmental environment. I know that sounds redundant, but it is true.
The reason I asked the question, it's not only my family. Churches do that. The Scouts do that to win money for Hershey Park. So if we educate before we get into trouble, because we pass a lot of stuff here, we make a lot of rules, and then when it comes to enforcement, we'll enforce it only on some people. Please look at that. It's very important, because a lot of my family and my brothers and sisters from the black community, I know they clean their cars, and if there's something else we can use, I don't have a problem with that. And I will help educate the people. Okay? Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
And I will note quickly, the ordinance mentions deterrents and compounds, but there are organic washes that you can utilize that would be allowed.
Great. Thank you for that context. Are there any other comments in the public for the amendments? That's where we are. Hearing none, Mr. Harris, the vote on the amendments.
Yes, Madam Vice President. Ms. Baker.
Aye.
Mr. Cleese.
Aye.
Ms. Craig.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
And Ms. Walsh.
Aye.
Thank you. And Mr. Harris, if I'm correct, we then need to vote on the ordinance as amended. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, just want to make sure. So then we have amendments that have been approved. Are there any council comments on the ordinance as it stands now? And from the public? Thank you very much. Mr. Harris?
On the amended bill. Ms. Baker.
Aye.
Mr. Cleese.
Aye.
Ms. Craig.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
And Ms. Walsh.
Aye.
Thank you very much. That takes us to now Administration Bill number 18, 2022. Mr. Harris.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Lancaster, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, establishing a residential rental licensing and inspection system, including designation of the rights and responsibilities of owners, property managers, tenants, and code officials of the City of Lancaster, procedures regarding disruptive conduct by property occupants, and inspection requirements and procedures, providing for violations, penalties, and remedies, providing for appeals, providing for the repeal of inconsistent ordinances, providing for the severability of the ordinance, and providing that the ordinance shall take effect on January 1st, 2023.
Motion to approve.
Second. We have a motion and a second. I believe, Mr. Nixon, you'll be providing us some additional context on this evening.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. I thank you for your time. I just wanted to provide you a little bit of update. We spoke earlier this month in reference to the fee schedule changes that are going to be taking in effect with this ordinance. I just wanted to provide you some context of those changes and allow any questions that may come to be answered by me for those changes that are going to come. Mr. Harris, could you please bring up the slides for the fee schedule? Thank you. So as discussed earlier this month, we have simplified our fees. The first fee that we're going to discuss tonight is how we have simplified the fees for the license. Our registration fees the registration process has been simplified to now we will only address the licensing. So the licensing of rentals will be done on a biannual basis. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. Our inspections have increased in the time. With the lead ordinance taking effect in January, our inspectors will be in the units for an hour and a half on average. Every time we enter into a unit, those units, about 12,000 that we have in our inventory right now, are subject to dust wipe sampling to be done. Every unit is going to be at minimum $32 on average for a dust wipe sampling. As I spoke earlier, our inspection time has moved from 15 to 20 minutes to about an hour to an hour and a half to conduct an inspection in those units. Our clerks are going to take on average about 30 minutes to produce any documents or paperwork that's going to need to be going out to the residents or to the landlords. I'm informing them of violations, scheduling of appointments, and rescheduling of other appointments. In addition, we're also going to have the first reinspection as a part of this biannual fee that they're going to be subject to. In addition, every short-term rental will be required to register annually. They are also subject to the same hour inspection, hour and a half inspection, about a 30-minute clerical time to provide additional documentation and information. Also, dust wipe sampling will be conducted at those short-term rentals on an annual basis. That fee is $250 annually. As of right now, that fee previously was identified as a transient dwelling, which is a $200 annual fee. It has increased to $250 annually now. All second and subsequent inspections will have a $120 fee. These inspection times will include about a 30-minute inspection, an additional a 30-minute time frame for clerical work. If you go to the next slide. 30 minutes for clerical work to provide documentation and information out to those residents. The next slide is going to speak to the transfer fees that are increasing to $200 per unit. Transfers are new property owners purchasing a rental property and wishes to assume this rental license in the unit. This will automatically cause those properties to have an inspection done by our team, which again will be subject to about an hour to an hour and a half inspection, as well as make it available for a dust wipe sampling to be conducted at that property. I'm open now for any questions or concerns that may be from council or the public.
Thank you very much for, pardon me, going over those. I just want to provide some context on the cost, and we've talked a lot as it related to a fee study on several meetings in the past about making sure that our fees line up with the amount of service. So I just want to clarify the first reinspection on that for the first change that you presented to us. So does the first reinspection mean if it would be necessary, or does that mean that there's always going to be a reinspection?
Yes, it does mean if it will be necessary. As I stated, we schedule 3,500 systematic inspections a year. Of that, we're doing over 5,000 re-inspections annually.
You answered my next question. Thank you. Any other comments or questions from members of council? Seeing none. Comments from the public?
Councilwoman.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Give us just one moment. Councilor Walsh.
Thank you so much. That 5,000 a year, so total, how many inspections are you doing? Is it 5,000 re-inspections plus 3,500 new unit inspections?
So annually, we're doing about 9,200 inspections annually. That includes complaint-based inspections, systematics, as well as re-inspections.
And the ordinance, the amendments that you're proposing, that does cut down on staff time, because my concern is how many staff do you have that are able to fulfill the inspection obligations?
So we are looking at how we can provide a more efficient inspection. We've talked about how we're looking at informing and educating the public by providing them rental guidelines and rental checklists so that they can be aware of what the inspection process looks like, so that when our staff goes in, that those units are already pre-prepared, so that we are allowed to take our time and complete the dust white sampling and such. We're also looking at other things that will be available to us in the next coming years that we would like to try to do to, again, provide better service to the public and to those that we're servicing.
Great. So are you benchmarking, so you said it takes about an hour and a half at present. How do you track that?
So what we've done is I've done research just to speak with our risk assessors that do dust white sampling, as well as the company that provided us the training of what is the average time that it takes. And we looked at that, and we looked at what the services that we're providing, and that's the average time that we're getting right now. Again, the lead service will not start until January, but we're projecting based off of what the information has been provided by the experts.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Acosta-Velez.
I want to thank him because I've been to his office and he's treated me with lots of respect. I appreciate that. Question I have, does that include, let's say, Garden Court, Umbrella Works, and those, every unit there is going to pay $250?
Yes, indeed.
Every unit?
I believe Mr. Nixon has something to interject to help clarify the answer to your question.
So, I'm sorry, I did not provide more context. So, units 1 through 6 will be $250 per unit. 7 units or greater at a parcel will be a $1,715 maximum fee that will be charged. My apologies.
I didn't see that on there, but thank you for calling that out specifically. Any other comments from the public? Mr. Soldrayer.
I think I understood, but could you just clarify the reason for why we're moving from 15 to 20 minutes to 90 minutes? Is it entirely due to the lead inspection, or are there other factors?
Thank you for your question. So, yes, it does include the lead, but in addition to that, we are looking to provide a more thorough inspection, making sure that we're looking at the preventive maintenance that can be done in the unit, just along with the deficiencies that we can identify, to provide not just only a better quality of house, but also educating them on how to prepare and keep their home safe and adequate for the future.
I guess then guess then my follow-up would be, what portion is due to the lead inspection? What portion is due to this education component that you mentioned?
So again, on average, for a dust white sampling, for a smaller unit, it's going to be about 8 sampling that has to be done in that unit, which can take anywhere between 45 and 50 minutes to be completed. So if you take that into consideration with the existing 20 to 25-minute inspection, that's where we're getting our average time of what we're going to be doing.
Thank you. And one other point of clarification, Mr. Nixon. These, including these changes and the bill and everything proposed in this bill, as the title suggested, would go into effect on January 1st. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Hearing none. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Madam Vice President. Ms. Bakay.
Aye.
Mr. Cleese.
Aye.
Ms. Craig.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
Ms. Walsh.
Aye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nixon.
Thank you.
Okay, that will take us to, yes, we're still in that section. Administration Bill number 19, 2022. Mr. Harris.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Lancaster, amending Chapter 249 of the Code of the City of Lancaster, Sewers, Part 1, Sewer System Regulations, Article 1, General Provisions, Sections 249-4, Definitions, Word Usage to revise the definition of building sewer lateral and lateral, to add a definition for sewer lateral, and to delete the definition of city service line, providing for the repeal of inconsistent ordinances, providing for the severability of the ordinance, and providing that the ordinance shall take effect in accordance with the laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
I'll hear a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Counselor Walsh.
Thank you. This one I think is a bit easier than the previous one coming out of Public Works, but what this ultimately does, in the vein of clarifying and redefining, there was language that was inconsistent within the original ordinance that didn't directly state which lateral was in question regarding the ordinance. So what this does is clarifies that as to who is responsible for which lateral, and above that, I don't have much else to add.
Thank you, and I know we've covered this on a previous meeting. Are there any comments or questions from council? And from the public?
I have a question, and maybe you can correct me. I remember we were talking about a company that was going to discharge. This has nothing to do with that, right?
That is a different item, yes.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that this is not sneaking through. So that other thing is still being looked at, right?
That's correct. These are separate issues.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Hearing none. Mr. Harris?
Ms. Bakay.
Aye.
Mr. Cleese.
Aye.
Ms. Craig.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
Ms. Walsh.
Aye.
All right. That will take us to Section C of our agenda for this evening, ordinances for first reading. We'll start then with Administration Bill number 20, 2022. Mr. Harris?
An ordinance authorizing the incurrence of non-electoral debt of the City of Lancaster, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, by the issuance of $53,500,000 principal amount of general obligation bonds, series of 2022, the 2022 bonds, issued for the purpose of providing funds for the 2022 project, which consists of A, improvements and upgrades to the city's water treatment and distribution facilities. B, improvements and upgrades to the city's parks and related facilities. C, improvements to streets and traffic signals within the city and related facilities. And D, improvements to stormwater facilities within the city Each is set forth in Exhibit A, hereto. And 2, other capital projects set forth on Exhibit A, hereto. 3, other miscellaneous capital projects, which may be by resolution of the City Council or in lieu of resolution by enactment of an ordinance of the city in connection with its capital budget, hereafter be approved. 4, paying capitalized interest on the 2022 bonds. And 5, paying issuance costs in connection with the 2022 bonds. Determining to sell the 2022 bonds at a private sale by negotiation or invitation. Approving the form of the 2022 bonds. Authorizing the purchase of bond insurance for the 2022 bonds, making a covenant for the payment of the debt service on the 2022 bonds, pledging the full faith, credit, and taxing power of the city in support of such bonds, providing for the filing of required documents, providing for the appointment of a sinking fund depository for the 2022 bonds, approving the filing of engineering reports with respect to the self-liquidating debt, and authorizing execution, sale, and delivery thereof, and other necessary action. The title, Madam Vice President.
Thank you very much, and I know that that's a mouthful. So again, this is a first read this evening, and I know Director Hopkins has some changes to the previously provided Exhibit A, and some updates on the amount from that title. Pass those down. Mr. Hopkins.
Thank you, Councilor Bakay. So this is a first reading, and as you know, typically first reading, it is Mr. Harris simply going through that extraordinarily long paragraph, and then we move on to the next agenda item. But we have had a few changes since Darrell Peck and I made the presentation to you at the Finance Committee meeting on September 6th, so I wanted to review those changes and also do a short review of the project list itself. If there are specific questions about the actual capital projects, I'll defer to Director Campbell on those, but I just wanted to give you sort of a broad overview. So when we made the presentation to you on September 6th, we were talking about roughly a $54 million of principal available for projects and a larger bond issue. I guess in addition to the historically vivid conversations that Director Campbell's been having with engineers, he's also been whittling through the capital project list, and we've been able to make some changes to reduce both the general fund portion and the stormwater fund portion of the bond issue in a number of different ways. One is that some projects we just either remove the project altogether or and not removed it from the full capital project list, but removed it as a project that would be done within the next 2 to 3 years based on the ability to pull off all the projects. The second piece is that in the email that I sent to you, which hopefully you will now all see, we have been going gangbusters on grants. Tina Campbell and Jen Orantes in the mayor's office and doing grant development work, been doing a phenomenal job. We have $14.3 million of grants leveraged with just in the general fund portion of this. So as you can see on the screen, we've got $15.4 million of projects and $14.3 million of grant funds that we're leveraging with those funds. And that doesn't include some other stormwater bond fund pieces of some of those projects. That also doesn't include what I believe is a $12 million Safe Streets for All grant application that is in the works that's related to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, which has a lot of funding for Vision Zero projects. As you know, Department of Public Works has been working, diligently on all manner of things related to safe streets and the Vision Zero projects. So with that, the changes that you see here under the general fund, we've reduced the total amount available for projects to $15.4 million. And what that does, one of the things we've also had to deal with outside of the project list is the fact that interest rates are rising. You all have seen what the Fed has been doing over time during this year, and that's had an impact on us. So the changes that I'm presenting to you take into account both the reduction in the total amount available for projects, but also the increased interest rates. So in the general fund, the reduction in the total amount available for projects more than offsets the increase in interest rates that we see. So when we presented to you in September, we had the new debt service impact from the general fund portion of the bond issue that would impact us in 2024, would have been an increase in debt service of about $873,000. What you have in front of you now, even though we are going to see higher interest rates, is an impact of $825,000, $826,000. So that's a reduction of about $50,000 a year in the debt service in that first year. Then moving on to the stormwater fund, we originally had a list of about $12.1 million of projects, and that's been reduced down to about $9.7 million of projects. Again, the debt service impact would be first impact would be in 2024. What we previously presented to you was $858,000 increase in stormwater debt service, and now we're looking at about $718,000. So about $140,000 reduction in the annual debt service there, impacting in 2024. In the water fund portion, essentially the project list and the total is about the same as it was that we presented in September. So we have a little bit different story here in that we had previously presented to you that the debt service impact, and in the water fund it would kick in 2025, would be about $1,727,000, and now we're looking at about $1,860,000 impact, so about $130,000 increase, and almost all of that increase is related to just an assumption of higher interest rates that we'll pay with this bond issue. The other thing I ought to note is just that while we are going to see higher interest rates with this bond issue because of the Fed's actions and other things going on in the world, if you look at this over a much longer time horizon, we're still in an incredibly low interest rate environment. It's just that we were at, in some cases, literally at zero. So we're moving into a different world right now, but it is still a very positive interest rate environment. So I want to pause there and see if there are any questions on just the sizing of the bond issue or the debt service impacts and where they fall now.
I don't have any at the moment. Any questions at this juncture from Mr. Hopkins from council? Councilor Walsh?
With the projects that were, you said the projects that were removed or not going to be utilized or developed the next 2 to 3 years, where are the list of those projects?
So there is, I know that there is a plan to present the full capital project plan. The Department of Public Works has been working with PFM to develop what truly is the first time all-in 20 to 25-year look at capital projects across the entire city, in the general fund, parks, facilities, streets, things like that, and also in the enterprise funds. I don't remember the column letters that we get out to, but it's somewhere in it's beyond AZ, I think. So it's an enormous tool. But that work that DPW has been doing with PFM is really to develop this tool that now can be used year in and year out, so that we're not just looking at what are we planning to do in the next 2 to 3 years, but what are all of the things that are out there over the next 20 to 25 years, so that we can truly plan those projects, prioritize them, and also right-size debt service issuances and time them much better, especially in the enterprise funds, with when we will be able to do rate increases to offset the impact of the debt service increase. And I'm sure I probably missed something in there about the capital project planning, so I'll turn it over to Director Campbell.
Thank you very much. I'll just say a few words about how we're strategizing here. In many ways, the projects that we're talking about and the initiatives that are very important, Vision Zero, Safe Streets, efficiencies for management of our work, et cetera, are still there. But what we recognized is that over the course of the next 1 to 2 years, for some of these, especially the larger initiatives, we'll only be able to spend the dollars for design, which is quite a subset of the capital dollars. And while we're doing that, because of the success of our grantsmanship, we're seeing that a lot of the enhancements that improve the quality of the design, the quality of life, the way that we manage enhancements for stormwater management, et cetera, may be able to be offset by additional grants. We're very, very happy with how the more measured and aggressive way that we're looking at alternative means of funding is being successful. So, and the last part of the strategy is that there are avenues with the Build Back Better and with the different programs that are being made available that are targeting especially things like parks, Vision Zero, and transportation. So we have a very high faith that we'll be able to get funding when we need it for the capital construction work. Hopefully, much of it is grant work. Being cautious, though, in some cases, we know that there are certain funding matches that we need to provide for. So we have kept in some of these lines the dollars that would be necessary to fulfill a match in certain of the sources. I do look forward to the opportunity sometime in the hopefully not too distant future to give a more comprehensive description and show of the comprehensive investment plan, where that would be laying out the foundation that you should expect to see on an ongoing planning basis year by year as we go forward. But these are the strategies that we're using, having for the first time brought together a lot of these capital planning initiatives in one place, and be able to say, how do we strategize getting them paid for, getting them moving forward, or putting them on hold where necessary without sacrificing the long-term objectives.
Thank you. That's helpful in trying to understand how these projects are being prioritized. So I look forward to that.
Thank you, Director Campbell. I just want to say I appreciate your work on this. I know that you mentioned how many lines were in that spreadsheet. It's not easy stuff, and we're only seeing a little sliver of what that might look like with this exhibit for this particular bond issue. So I appreciate that it is a large undertaking, but it's an important one for, financial planning of the city. Any other comments from council at this point? And then, if not, Mr. Hopkins, if you want to continue on?
Sure.
No, okay.
Okay, so again, I do not, I definitively will not be reviewing each of these projects, but I wanted to just sort of walk you through what is on this Exhibit A, so that you, and this is actually even part of the capital project list. This is part of a separate spreadsheet that Director Campbell and I have been working on. So on the list, they are categorized with the parks and facilities, I'm sorry, the streets and, let me get my categories in front of me. The street summary, okay, is first, and then sorry, this is jumping around on me. the parks and facilities are the next section. So when you are looking at this, you'll see the general fund piece is broken up into the streets versus parks and facilities. The project list itself then has what the individual project is, a brief project description, the amount of bond proceeds that are required for that project. And this is a piece I wanted to focus in on is you did, earlier this year, you did two separate authorizations for essentially pre-funding of these capital projects. So the total that you see for each of these individual projects is inclusive of the reimbursement requirement for anything that was previously authorized and already spent. As of today, very little of the general fund piece that you pre-authorized has actually been spent. There's anticipation that by the time that we close on this bond issue, more will be spent, but there's not, but right now it's actually less than $100,000 that's been spent already that needs to be reimbursed with bond proceeds. But I just wanted to focus in on that number that you see there is inclusive of everything that you have authorized and any additional bond funds needed to complete the project. Then we have an estimated useful life of the project. In the context of a bond issue, that's an important number because if you look at the general fund piece, we're amortizing this over 20 years. You want to make sure that you're funding projects that are on average at least 20 years of life. And the vast majority of these projects are 20, 25-year and even longer projects. It's only in some of the plans, like the Parks Master Plan, where the life of that project, if you will, which is really just the plan, is about 10 years. And then a listing of the other funds that are available for the projects. And you'll see that the vast majority of the grant funding is in the general fund related grants. As you can imagine, in the enterprise funds, we're talking about the stormwater fund and the water fund. The grant opportunities there are not nearly as great as they are on the general fund side. That said, we still don't know what may be coming through Bipartisan Infrastructure Act to the state that may end up becoming grant opportunities for water, sewer, and stormwater. So that's sort of a TBD. So and then just sort of, walking through this entire thing, you can see each of the projects listed there, the summaries for each of the sections within the general fund. Then we have the stormwater fund. Again, that project list is about 9.7 million down from about 12.1 million. There you see notation here, green infrastructure project design and construction, $4 million now, but in anticipation, in coming years of the need for additional work. The stormwater infrastructure, green infrastructure projects are going to be an ongoing every year. So in anticipation of additional projects there, at least right now from future bond issuances, but if there are other loan or grant opportunities that would be better than doing a bond issue, we would pursue those. And then the Trees for People implementation, that is one where I'm sure you all saw this news that we were awarded a $500,000 allocation from the county's ARPA proceeds that will really boost the ability for the city to increase the tree canopy in the city. And then in the water fund, the projects are split between water transmission and distribution and the Conestoga and Susquehanna plants. And you see the total for the water fund, the $23.8 million, and the all funds total of about $49,930,000. So I will pause there and see if there are any questions here. Again,
Great.
there are ones about specific projects. I'll defer to Director Campbell, but just sort of the structure of this, I wanted you all to see.
I'd first like to just clarify the timing that we have set forth on this, because this is, again, a first read, so we're not taking
Yes.
any action on this evening. But there will be a bond auction.
Yes, so what we're anticipating right now is that we would have that auction on October 25th, and so be bringing the final ordinance and the results from that bond auction at the second meeting in October. We had talked about there's another option, as the first meeting in November. The other reality is that the Fed Open Market Committee meets after October 25th and before that meeting, so it seems to make sense to go for October 25th.
Thank you very much.
I talked with Darrell about that this morning, and we agreed it makes sense to stay on that schedule. We have a ratings call with Moody's scheduled for the end of the first week of October, and so that we're on the right schedule for October 25th.
Great. Any other comments from council? Questions for Mr. Hopkins?
Mayor,
Councilor Diaz?
what's your anticipation on the percentage?
I actually don't know the rate that Darrell plugged in here. I know that he is cautiously conservative when he puts these estimates together. So he's looking at where rates are right now. I don't want to guess a number, but as you all, well, actually not all of you are familiar. So the process that we go through when we do the bond sale itself is we hold an online auction, and that auction, our experience has been in that auction that we get quite a lot of large organizations, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, that size of organization, especially for an issuance this size. And we get aggressive bidding. I refer to it as eBay for government bonds. It is basically a blind auction, and they are trying the winner is obviously the one that submits the lowest interest rate bid. So I don't want to take a guess at a number. I know, unless something very strange happens, it will be higher than the rate that we paid in the last issue, which was in the high 2%.
The market has been going up. I
Yes.
was just curious I guess every day is going to be a different story because obviously they can change at any rate. But if you're looking at what it used to be, which is 2%, possibly could go up to 6%. Is that more or less?
I wouldn't see any world that we would be looking at a 6% rate for all in for this issuance.
I think they're
It's certainly
looking
going to be higher than where we were, but what is happening with the Fed rates is not a direct reflection that with what would happen in a bond auction. It is the reality that interest rates overall are going up, and so when you hold an auction and want the lowest rate that you can possibly get, investors are not going to go super low in a higher interest rate environment.
I think that the last I heard, the Fed was looking at raises between 0.75% and 1%, which is, again, not directly reflective of what a bond would be, but it's in line with that amount of increase generally. Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from council?
The only other piece I wanted to, just because he has been sitting here patiently, is just Mr. McCarty distributed to you earlier, and you should also have in your email now, what is now for the first reading of this ordinance. And as I mentioned, at September 6th, we wanted to get the form of this ordinance as close as possible to what the final will be, so that when we do come back to you on October 25th, we don't have a 50-page motion to amend. We only have a 3 or 4-page motion.
25 pages. Thank you for that. We'll hear any comments from the public on the first read. Mr. Acosta-Velez.
Can you please tell me what is our rate for bonds? What are we rated at?
Our bond rating is A3 from Moody's.
A3?
Yes.
Okay, and how much of this, without getting into all that, would be debt we already have? Okay, you're asking for $64 million on projects. That 64 is going to be on all projects, or is that going to cover all the debt we have on other?
No, this is the issuance itself is for funding of new projects. Doesn't have anything to do with any outstanding debt that we have right now.
So we're gonna get $64 million bond?
Well,
Complete.
the revised number is a max of 53,500,000. I anticipate the actual number will be lower than that.
Okay, so we're really going into $53 million. How much do we already have on debt?
The city's total outstanding debt is somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 million. And the vast majority of that is in the water and sewer funds. And regardless of whether they are municipal or private owned, water and sewer systems are incredibly capital intensive. They require lots of capital investment, which also means that water and sewer systems carry large amounts of debt because they borrow money to make
Okay,
those
so it's
capital improvements.
My question on this, and real quickly, and sorry I'm taking a little bit more of time. On this, I had talked to Mr. Campbell on the pipes that go into the home for water. Is that project in there, or is that 25 years down the line? There's some pipes that are lead in the city. We're an old city.
So,
And there's
yeah,
not
if
a
you're-
lot, but they
I'll
are.
defer to Mr. Campbell if you're talking about the lead pipe, lead service line issue.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question. I think that the answer that you need is that the lead lines, there's a small percentage of lead lines that we're replacing on a regular basis, and that's out of the general fund, not out of the capital bond that we would be doing. We have been applying and will continue to apply for grant funds to take care of the lead service lines replacement, which might allow us to accelerate getting that work done in a matter of 2 to 4 years, rather than at our current rate, which is a replacement of 3% of the lines per year, which would take the better part of 30 years. So it's part of the balancing act that we're trying to do. These dollars here are not the intended borrowing for the lead lines. We're hoping that those will be either grant, if we're successful in one of our future applications, and as council may know, we had actually asked for permission to make an application before. We made that application, and because of the extraordinary requirements for compliance, we were not eligible for that particular grant, but there are several other grants available. So if that answers your question, it's not specifically, this is not going to the lead lines. The funds from the general fund go to our replacement of lead lines. And unfortunately, unless and until there is actually a program or a grant program, as per statute, the replacement of the lead lines often falls to the property owner. That's why we're so anxious to be able to find a grant program so that we can take that burden out.
If I could also just interject, the number of lead lines that we are talking about in the city is in the hundreds, not the thousands.
Yes, if I may, we have 48,000 service lines in the city of Lancaster. 3,800 of them are ones that might be lead. That's 8%. We know that there are 640 or approximately 640 lines that are definitely lead. That's a little bit more than 1% of the lines. So it's not a huge, obviously if you encounter lead and you're faced with having to pay for that, that's a major thing for you, but it really is a very small instance where the possibility is where we're going to be encountering the lead lines.
And I'll also just,
If I may, the city of Lancaster over the course of the last several years has been much more aggressive than many other municipalities in addressing and getting rid of those lead lines.
and I'll also just say that because the degree of paperwork and basically bureaucracy to administer the grant was so onerous, we have been following up with the governor's liaison to the White House as it relates to that legislation and the requirements around income eligibility. And as well, I'll be carrying that message myself later this week because we understand the priority for these funds. And at the same time, we have to balance the other infrastructure needs that we have to serve our constituents around water and sewer as well. So we're going to continue staying focused on the grant funding and trying to change some of those regulations so that they're more in keeping with the needs of the city of Lancaster.
My question is, if there's not the grants, what are we doing? Are we changing like 2 every month? Or do we have to do the whole street? That's my question, because I'm concerned because lead's affecting my community a lot, more than I thought it did.
Again, it's a very important question. The percentage of lead lines, or the potential percentage of lead lines we have, is significantly lower than the percentage of lead lines that most municipalities of our age have, partly because we have been so aggressive in getting rid of them. If we do not get the grants, we will be looking at continuing what the statutory requirement is, which is 3% of replacement per year, which equates to approximately 80 to 95 lead lines per year to be replaced. We want to be very aggressive. That's why we are going after several of these grant opportunities, because we don't want lead to remain. But the only alternative we have if we do not go with the grants is to suddenly impose on a much larger percentage of that 8% the cost of removal, because the statutes require that the property owner take care of it. So in many ways, we are asking for patience as we continue to make these applications so that we find the right grants to take care of the lead and not impose that cost on the property owners.
The reason I pointed out is my house had lead. It wasn't taken care correctly. But I'm worried about talking to some Spanish people, and I talk to a lot of them. Janet can tell you. And they have kids that have this problem real young. So I think we should look at it at council. Maybe you can call your senator. I'm sure going to call mine. Okay, so make sure that we get this moving, because this is dangerous, not only for my kids in my community. If you visit their home and you drink water, not everybody can buy bottled water. So can we look at this and maybe, I don't know, get one of the senators here, maybe the new one that will be elected and the one that we already have, to really look at this, because this is affecting, it's showing that a lot of these kids' behaviors in school, and I was a teacher, so I can tell you, they get to the point that they don't learn. Okay? So please look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Costa-Velez. Excuse me. Are there any other comments from the public on the bond issue?
I feel the need to throw in this one other piece of information about the lead issue, because
Okay.
The city's water treatment process includes an anti-corrosive that gets put into the system to not eliminate, but reduce the threat of lead corroding. It's the corrosion of the lead getting into the water that is a real problem. The city, has always used that anti-corrosive. We're also federally required to do, under the lead and copper rule, to do testing of properties where there is suspected or known lead service lines, and we report that on an annual basis. So I just wanted to make sure that clarification is out there.
I appreciate that. It's an ongoing thing. Okay. Hearing no other comments from the public, I will thank you very much, Mr. Hopkins, and we will talk more about this at our second meeting in October.
Yes.
Thank you. That takes us to resolutions, and that's section D on our agenda. Administration Resolution Number 75, 2022. Mr. Harris.
A resolution of the City Council approving a memorandum of understanding by and between the School District of Lancaster and the City of Lancaster to conduct a school-age child care gap analysis for Lancaster's working families who rely on child care to secure and maintain employment.
I hear a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. This came up through Economic Development Committee, but Councilor Royer's not here this evening, but I believe this is coming through the mayor's office.
Thank you, Counselor. This is an exciting opportunity for the school district of Lancaster and the city of Lancaster to work together to do a gap analysis of our school-age childcare needs. This administration resolution spells out that the funds for this initiative will be paid for by the school district of Lancaster, and the project will be administered by the city of Lancaster. We have a work plan and a scope of work that we are reviewing now that will include parent focus groups, surveying that we'll be partnering with the school district of Lancaster to complete, as well as key informant interviews with our child care providers that provide school-age child care in the city of Lancaster, both before and after school, as well as during the summer months. We'll be providing regular reports to the School Board of Lancaster and to City Council related to our findings, and looking forward to continuing to work together with the School District of Lancaster to support our families, both in terms of addressing educational achievement related to COVID learning loss, as well as summer slide, as well as enhancing workforce opportunities for families who do not currently have access to childcare.
Thank you. And what is the time frame for the beginning of this, should this resolution be passed this evening?
Next week, we have to move on. We've reviewed a scope of work with the School District of Lancaster. We have scheduled a kickoff meeting. I don't have the exact date, but that will be coming up in the next several weeks. So it's going to start immediately.
Great. Any other comments from council on the resolution? Comments from the public? Hearing none. Mr. Harris?
Ms. Bakay?
Aye.
Mr. Calise?
Aye.
Ms. Gregg?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Ms. Walsh?
Aye.
Thank you. And our final resolution this evening, Administration Resolution Number 77, 2022. Mr. Harris.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Lancaster, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, amending its fee schedule.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Hopkins is providing us with the updated Exhibit A. And these changes, if I'm not mistaken, coincide with the rental
That's
ordinance changes that we spoke about earlier
Yes.
this evening and voted on.
Yeah, so I don't want to belabor this because I feel like this is about my 93rd time talking to you about the
We've come back
The
to this
fees,
several times.
I will say that we picked a really challenging time to do a fee study and implement this because, as you know, we had to look back at 2019 activities, then look at 2022 budget. And some of the challenges that we had with the rental property fees were, while we are simplifying the fee structure, the simplification process was not so simple. So this Exhibit A, which is all of the changes to the fee schedule being proposed, is all the same except for 3 chapters. So Chapter 223 is on page 5. And I just realized I'm not plugged in. And this is a reflection of really some of the simplification that Mr. Nixon talked about. So Chapter 223 is a property maintenance chapter, and there were 2 separate fees related to condemnations, removal of the notice and the removal of the placard. There's obviously a lot more to a condemnation than that. There are inspections, sometimes multiple re-inspections at a property that's condemned to ensure that, one, that it's not occupied and that no sort of further deterioration has happened there. That two separate fees has been combined into a condemnation lift fee of $285. So for the condemnation to be removed, there's an inspection and other work that goes into that, and so that fee would be changed to $285. Issuance of a code letter fee is really where a property owner requests that an inspection be done at their property. And right now, that fee is different based on whether or not it's a single unit or multiple units. In this case, what we're doing is consolidating that to just $150 per unit for that private inspection. And then the other part that changed in 223 is the removal of, there were references to rental license fees that had been in the fee schedule for Chapter 223, and they just don't belong there because they're rental housing related licenses and fees that are related to Chapter 238. So this change is just to remove those fees, which are referenced in Chapter 238 section. The next section is Chapter 229, which is on page 6 of the fee schedule that you have. Here, it is a change to the appeal fee for the appeals related to property maintenance issues. And this is just directly tied back to the Maximus study that the work related to those appeals is a cost of about $300, so changing the fee to $300. And then the next section is Chapter 229, Public Nuisances. This is, I think it's a not often used section of the city code. There are fees related to initial occurrences and reoccurrences. And the idea is that the fee is escalated for additional occurrences. There are also fines related to particular public nuisances so that we can charge a fee for the work related to identifying the reoccurrence of the violation, but we can also issue a code citation and take the property owner through the magisterial district judge process and actually issue fines related to those public nuisances. The way that schedule is set up, and talking through this with the solicitor, it made sense to change that schedule based on the Maximus fee determination or cost determination, but it is intended to be an escalating fee for each additional occurrence. So changing it to $75, $100, $120, and then $130 for each additional occurrence was in line with the initial intent of the ordinance itself. And then finally, Chapter 238 that Mr. Nixon addressed. And here, really the only thing to identify further than what Mr. Nixon did is just to emphasize the fact that all types of residential property units, whether they are transient dwellings, hotels, boarding houses, 1 and 2 unit apartments, or multi-unit apartment buildings, are all being handled the same way in this fee structure. So they all move to a every 2-year fee of $250 per unit, and then again up to that maximum of $1,750 for a 7-unit or more property. And then on the on the issue with the short-term rentals, that is an every year fee because those inspections will happen every year at the short-term rentals, and that short-term rental is now the new terminology for Airbnbs, things like that, in the revisions to Chapter 238. The only other thing to identify here is that the one area where there is no fee change, we have a schedule of fees for Lancaster City Housing Authority properties. They actually have a separate inspection review that is done through That's required by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. And so the fee schedule for those properties is just different than all of the other properties in the city.
I appreciate you going over those with us. I was doing a quick look back, and I think the first time we started talking about the fee study and fee changes was in March. So it's been a long road,
Yes.
and I appreciate your work and coordinating all of the moving parts that have come along since then. Are there any questions or comments from council this evening?
Only other note is just that when we presented the revised version of this resolution, all of these fee changes are now scheduled to go into place January 1st of 2023. And that's really for this section that I just reviewed to coincide with the Chapter 238 changes.
Great, that's helpful context. Thank you. Any comments from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Ms. Baker,
Aye.
Mr. Cleese,
Aye.
Ms. Craig,
Aye.
Ms. Diaz,
Aye.
Ms. Walsh.
Aye.
Thank you very much. That concludes our legislative agenda this evening. It moves us to our second public comment period. Open for comments about issues that were not on the agenda. I'll just remind that you begin with your name, your block of residence for the public record. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per commenter. And I will just quickly say, if any of the 2 folks, I believe, that were scheduled to give comment in the beginning are here, and I don't believe they are, I would hold space for them. But not seeing them here, Mr. Acosta-Velez.
My name is Ivan Acosta-Velez, 804 Highland Avenue. I've called mayor's office, I've called the police chief. I need to meet with you guys. And if that's a problem, then I don't know why. Because there's issues. No one has gotten back to me, not even the courtesy. And some of your staff I've called, and the only staff that I have to say is that your assistant, you better give him more money. Every time. And so it's, we need to say, I don't think it has to be public, because there's some issues that people don't want to, I would have to bring up on different things that's happened, so we can live happy family with having our problems taken care of. So can you please call me so we can set up an appointment? I can meet with him and you. I don't care what time, just let me know. It's very important that we speak. Okay?
I see her setting a reminder as we speak, so.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I want to tell you something to think about it. Our city's growing, and there's a lot of people that don't understand our system. So I hope that in the training process, we tell the people, like you're doing, Jana's doing, and other people, and you're doing, to question and tell people, because some of the people need to be here. Okay? This is their city. And the reason I speak up, because I'm not scared. There's people that are scared of you. I ain't scared of you. Okay? I'm not, because I know you, and you live in my neighborhood, and I know, you know what I'm saying? And I tell you in a good way, so we can get some of these people. Another thing that, and I'm sorry I'm going over the 3 minutes, but another thing I wanted to suggest, we need to find an area that we can make those little houses that they're making them even in Harrisburg, okay? And that will help us get homes for the homeless people. And when they're settled down and they're not sleeping the way they're sleeping now, okay, we can get them, the ones that have mental illness, the ones that are veterans. They're doing it only for veterans, but we should look at, because let me tell you something. You should go to 150 Queen Street and see those poor people there, okay? There was a lady that I bought her coffee, and my tears came up because I couldn't bring her home with me. She's 80 years old, and she's in the street because of dementia. So there's a lot of things that are going. We could go home, but we're blessed. God has blessed us. Some of these people don't have family. Some of these people don't have no one that cares. So please look at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to give public comment this evening? Hearing none, then we'll move into the report of the mayor. Mayor Sarachi.
I am going to forego my report because of our earlier presentation from HR, and I, again, appreciate the opportunity to present our work to council.
Thank you very much. I don't have a report from the President of Council to provide this evening, so we'll move into any other council comments. Hearing none, I will hear a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Hear a motion and a second, almost reluctantly. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
I don't think
I mean, if you want to stay longer.
I'm just gonna get the words out. Is your family all okay? Are they mostly Ponce? I don't know.
My dad is in Double Water. It seems like that's where it always hits first.
Yeah.
And there's a hole in the roof and
Hi.
everything leaks. My sister